Welcome to Comedy Concepts with your host, Nancy Lombardo.
Okay, well, here's a little background info on him. Mr. Moore, on April 2nd, 1986, Tommy was told he might never stand on stage again. Since then, he's done over 3,500 shows, speeches, and seminars at comedy clubs, casinos, cruise ships, colleges, corporations, churches, synagogues, resorts, hotels, and on radio and TV. A true survivor, maybe the real last comic standing. And his new book, it just tells him his story on advice from comedy giants nursed him back to physical and emotional health. So why don't we bring on Mr. Tommy Moore right now. Tommy, are you there?
Thank you for having me on the show, and thank you so much for the glowing review.
I love this book, Tommy. Congratulations. You have been picked my favorite feel-good read of 2012.
That's so nice. I mean, you actually put that on Amazon.com.
I put it on Barnes & Noble, too, Tommy.
I know. I'm going to have them bronzed. If I can get my computer screen bronzed, I'm going to have that bronzed. So thank you for having me on, and it's great. And, you know, it's funny. Nancy is so cute because I just met her about a week ago, and she sends me emails that say, "Dear Doctor," because the book is called The PhD in Happiness. You don't have to call me doctor.
Professor no, it's a doctor thing.
No, professor is okay. You know, no, Tommy's good. I'm a comedian. Just call me Tommy. Although I was a professor for 5 years. For 5 years I taught comedy at Temple University. Well,
that's why I called you Dr. Feelgood.
There you go. That's a good thing, too. But
let's go back a little bit for people who don't know you. Now, that was just a little bit of a teaser, but let's start with, and then we'll move forward. In 1986, what happened?
Oh, in 1986, I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. I was in the middle of a robbery, and luckily the guy who was doing the robbing didn't have a gun, but he did have an iron pipe. So he hit me on the head 8 or 9 times with the pipe. I say 8 or 9 because after 7, you stop counting. And he put a gag in my mouth, and he tied my hands behind my back and tied a noose around my neck, and he locked me in a room and left me for dead. The last thing he said, though, before he locked me in a room, he looked down and said, "Don't try anything funny." Now, I had been a comedian and comedy magician my whole life. Never tell a comedian not to be funny. And tying up a magician just serves as a challenge. Ask Houdini, all right? So luckily, I got myself out of the bonds. I kicked down the door, went to the hospital. They sewed me back up like the scarecrow in The Wizard of Oz. And in the hospital, I literally had a police guard on my door because I was an important witness because this guy had killed a few people that week. I was luckily the only one who survived, luckily for me, unluckily for them. But I laid in that bed, and I was in casts from head to toe, but I was lucky because every friend I had was a comedian because I had been a comedian at that point for 20 years. And they all came to visit me, and they all made me laugh. As a matter of fact, usually in a comedy club situation, the people are lined up to see the comedian. Here, the comedians were lined up to see me. And the guy in the next bed should have paid a cover charge. But there was laughter around my bed 24/7, and that's when I realized how important laughter is.
And it's amazing from that because in this book, and, you know, if you're thinking you're just buying another comedy book, you're not. It is really, I've said, forget The Secret. Get this book.
Thank you.
Is truly an inspiring book of coming back and even your fight for survival. And I'm not going to give it much away, but that even in all the horror that you were in, your first thought was not really for yourself. It was that you were afraid your wife was going to come back, and you were more afraid for somebody else than yourself, and you're in the worst possible condition there is.
Oh,
and that
absolutely.
I was so touched by that.
Oh, you know, I mean, I was laying there, and 2 things went through my head. Number one, that my wife was going to come back, and who knows, the robber might be there, and who knows what he might do. I said, I have to get out of the situation to protect her. And number 2, I was thinking, I have a show Saturday night, and I can't miss it.
In true comedian fashion, because that's how we think. What about my show, first thing?
Exactly. And the funny thing is, when I'm laying in the bed in the hospital, there was one...
Tell them what they said to you, what the doctor said.
One comedy club owner and one doctor said, "You may never stand on a stage again." And I said to myself, "You want to bet?" And 4 days later, when I was supposed to do the show at LaSalle University, I did that show. In head-to-toe bandages, I did the show. I mean, I booked 3 other comedians with me because I knew I couldn't stand on stage for 40 minutes. I could just about stand. But they literally carried me from the car to the show, to the stage. I walked on. I did 15 minutes about doctors and hospitals because I was in casts and bandages. And after the show, kids from LaSalle came back and they thought it was a gimmick. They didn't think the bandages were real. They thought it was just a show business thing. I said, no, this is real, because they introduced me from the emergency ward, Tommy Moore.
Oh, my gosh. And that's the other part of this book that I truly love, Tommy, is that how your friends came to you, just came to your rescue, just phenomenal, just that they were all there for you. They were whatever they could do, that the comedian camaraderie that surrounded you. You must be such a loved person to do that. But first, Tommy, in the front of your book, okay, you have some biblical phrases?
In the Bible, in the Talmud, and this is a great story, in the Talmud, Elijah is walking through the marketplace, and somebody says to him, who here is worthy of heaven's gate? And he looks around and he says, only those 2. And they said, what have those 2 people done to be worthy of heaven? And he said, they're comedians. When they see people who are sad or depressed, they tell them jokes and they make them laugh. Isn't that a wonderful thing? I mean, that's in the Talmud. It is so wonderful. And laughter is so important.
And it's in the Bible as well, too. I love that joke, by the way. But it's in the Bible.
In the Bible, it says, a merry heart doeth good like a medicine. You know, Bill Cosby said you can turn a painful situation around through laughter. There's a Chinese proverb that says, one joy scatters 100 fears. And there's a Jewish proverb that says, when you're hungry, sing, and when you're hurting, laugh. You know, but my favorite may be from comedian Minnie Pearl, who said, laughter is God's hand on the shoulder of a weary world.
It's so true. And also, I love that quote you used, Minnie Pearl. I had always attributed it to her, but now she attributed it to somebody else. And the best advice you could give a comedian was to
go out there and love them, and they'll love you back.
And that's a terrific secret for anyone. That's anything you do, or if you have to stand up and speak, just love who you're talking to, and you'll get that back. Now, tell us about how you got all these celebrities to get these quotes.
Well, luckily,
you knew them? You worked with them? How did this come about?
I knew them. I've been in show business for 40 years, and between being a comedian and a comedy club owner and having written a comedy newspaper article for 11 of those years, I probably talked to every comedian or met every comedian or worked with every comedian that ever was. I mean, I thank God every day that in 40 years in show business, I got to meet and work with the legends. I mean, I'm talking about people like Jay Leno and Bob Hope and Jerry Lewis and Milton Berle and George Burns. And they taught me show business lessons that I realized translated very easily into real life lessons. And that's what the book's about. I mean, I've got lessons in there about faith and finding yourself and worry and fear and hate and forgiveness and hope and gratitude and love and joy and following your dreams and eliminating negativity. I was a very negative person before this thing happened. I mean, you know that story about if there's a glass of milk and it's half full, if you see it half full, you're an optimist. If you see it half empty, you're a pessimist. Well, I would see a potentially spilled glass of milk with jagged pieces of glass on the floor that I would walk on, cut my foot, get lockjaw, tetanus, and die. That's how negative I was.
The extreme. Whereas I am an optimistic pessimist. I will buy a lottery ticket and never see if I won.
There you go.
The quotes in there are very good. I'm trying to think of one that. What was the? Do you remember? I know you worked on this book. I can't find the page exact. There was a George Burns one, maybe towards the back of the book.
Yeah. Well, George Burns said to me one of the things. I gave George Burns 2 chapters in the book. But
yes,
one of the
164 I'm looking at.
Well, I don't even have to look at the book. It's all in my head.
I know.
But one of the things he said to me was, in show business, when you go to a theater, get to know the manager.
That's right.
Get on the manager's good side, because the manager can do a lot for you. Manager can smooth out some problems. The manager can forgive some flaws. The manager can do a lot. Now, people call God a lot of different things. There are 100 different religions, and they all have different names for God, whether it's the force or the prime mover. I like to call God the manager. And if you get on the manager's good side, the manager can help you out a lot. I don't get really religious in the book, but I do get spiritual because I believe in God. And I know some people don't, and that's fine. I'm just talking about God from a biographical standpoint, But I believe in God, and there are real reasons why. And it's not because somebody told me or because I read in the book.
No, you mentioned that in your book, and it's not in a I don't want to mislead people. It's not in a pragmatic way that he's saying it. He's saying when Tommy talks about his connection to his religious and spiritual side, it's about how it works for him. It's in total respect for every other religion, but how it works for him and how, I'm with you, Tommy, that things happen and you go, wow, that's so cool. And I'm not going to give it away because there was a really cool thing that happened in the book, but they have to buy the book if they want to find out what it is. And where can they get that book, Tommy?
They can get it on Amazon.com or they can get it on Kindle. And the best way, if you go on Amazon.com, even though it's called a PhD in Happiness from the Great Comedians, if you put the period in the wrong place with PhD, it won't come up. If you just put Happiness Tommy Moore in the search engine of Amazon.com, you can get it as paperback or you can get it as Kindle.
That's terrific. And do you have a website? Can they go directly to your website?
Yeah, the website is profcomedy.com. That's PROF as in professor, COMEDY.com. And they can go to my website and see all the different things I've done.
Well, that's true, too. Let's talk about that, Tommy. So, first off, I'm going to always go back to the book because I really do think this is a terrific book to buy for your friends. This is a terrific book. I had a friend on recently, Carol Schabelli, who wrote a book called Poor Widow Me, and that's for when you don't know what to say to somebody who's lost someone. And that was really Carol Schabelli's book, Poor Widow Me. Very good. She's got a blog. But it's helpful. I found your book, if I had a depressed friend or a friend who was questioning things or just couldn't go on, this would be the book I would buy for them. And
Thank
say,
you so much.
Read this book. There's so many inspirational quotes. Do you have any favorites in there?
I guess my favorite inspirational quote, we were talking about, loving what you do. Uncle Dirty, who was a comedian from the 60s, who worked with everybody from George Carlin to Richard Pryor, Uncle Dirty used to say in his act, in life, not to be loved is miserable, but not to love is a tragedy. You got to go out there and love people. You got to go out there whether they love you back or not. I saw something just last week. It said, I won't spend time hating the people who hate me. I'm too busy loving the people who love me.
Yeah.
Love is such an important thing. Love gives you happiness. If you give out love, you get it back. And it's happiness, and that's what the whole book is about, is happiness.